So I'm curious as to how you defend profit motives when they've historically and even in the status quo incentivized people to do evil and or immoral things. Like as an example, say the prison industrial complex where people in the prison system need a way to maximize their profits, so they go to passing petty drug crimes so that we can funnel 5 times what the U.S.'s population is in proportion to the rest of the world into the prison system so that we can basically have a modern form of slavery, or say in like the drug industry where we're constantly making our pharmaceuticals and say tobacco more addictive so the consumer keeps coming back. And this like, we see this phenomenon where you have this incentivization to maximize your profits to the utmost, and it leads to people doing evil and immoral things. And when even like you don't want to do immoral things in the market, you're booted out by your competitor who is willing to maximize their profits in that way. And so you can't even compete, and if you won't maximize, then you're automatically kicked out of the market.
Okay, so first of all, I think it's a complete misread of capitalism. Capitalism is a repeated iteration game. So you have an incentive you may have the incentive to screw somebody in a one-off transaction. But the reality is that you are not going to succeed economically if you screw millions and millions of people in transactions in which there are competitors and there's enough transparency in order to find out about it. So the examples that you give, like the prison industrial complex, as you suggest, I don't actually think that criminal justice laws are being written by the wardens at the prisons. I think that there are a lot of people who are afraid of crime, and that is why they have passed these particular criminal laws. Now, I may be against some of those, right? I'm in favor of decriminalization of marijuana, for example, because I think that the government has completely failed at it. It's been a terrible idea. But I wouldn't attribute that to the outgrowth of capitalism. Communism was the ruling philosophy in the Soviet Union, and they had legitimately tens of millions of people living in giant gulags. So communist states are not actually known for their freedom of movement. As far as the other example that you were using, drug companies that are attempting to create more and more addictive drugs. Again, there are torts we do have tort laws that allow us to sue these companies if they are mislabeling things. They get fined out of existence in some cases. To point out the cases in which bad actors misuse capitalism is to point out that human nature involves bad actors. Okay, capitalism is just the idea that you are a sovereign human being with the capacity to create a product and sell it at the price you choose, and that I, as a consumer, have the capacity to buy that product at a price that I choose to pay. That is legitimately the essence of capitalism. Anything else in which you are hijacking the state in order to promote yourself is not capitalism. That's not capitalism, that's corporatism. Anything else where you are attempting to defraud somebody, that's criminal in every capitalist state. We do have fraud crimes. And again, I would be remiss unless I acknowledge that capitalism has also led to a halving of the global poverty rate over the last 40 years. People living in abject poverty, that has been halved on a global rate by capitalism. Your life is awesome because of capitalism. The people who are living in Europe, their life is awesome because of capitalism. Places that don't have property rights are places, and free alienation of the products and services that you create, those are places that live in impoverishment. Those are places that collapse in on themselves. And for all the people who say that, look at the Nordic countries, right, because the Nordic countries are all based on capitalism, and then they redistribute the profits, which you can do, right? That's the thing you can do. But that is not a rip on capitalism. That is a suggestion that you redistribute the profits. I have a lot of cases against that, but to pretend that Norway is a good example of social means of control of the means of production is just not the case. It's just not true. Yeah, you can follow up, that's fine.
Right, so you mentioned how the prison system, most of the laws are at least justifiable. Why would we have 5 times the proportion in relation to the rest of the world? Are Americans more inherently violent, or
well, number one, we have a lot of drug crimes, and number two, but more than that, there are a lot of criminals. It's not enough to just say there's a disparity. We have to figure out why that disparity exists, right. And you have to explain. Do you think that there are a bunch of innocent people who are in prison right now? Do you think that we have 4 times as many innocent people in prison in the United States? We're a giant gulag state. We're just running out there. The cops are running out there and arresting people willy-nilly on the streets in order to fill the prisons because we have to have a prison industrial complex?
I think because most people who are in prison is the result of petty drug crimes.
That's
in a
not
sense.
true. The vast majority of people in prison are in prison for non-drug crimes. This is true on a state and a federal level. And statistically speaking, it's just not the case that 80% of the people in prison are in prison because of drug crimes, and certainly not possession crimes. There are a lot of people and by the way, most of the people who are in prison because of possession crimes are in prison for possession crimes because they were actually drug dealers and they pled down to drug possession. Because our prison system is indeed overcrowded because we have too many people committing crimes. But I'm not sure that is, you'd have to show me the innocent person in prison, then I agree with you. You want to show me an innocent person in prison, or you want to show me a law that you feel is not justified by its effect, then we can actually have a conversation. But the mere statement that we have a lot of people in prison doesn't answer the question as to whether people should actually be in prison. If they're committing crimes, they should be in prison.
Thank you.